Our Around the World segment tonight, 8 days until President Obama leaves office, and it's like he's setting the world on fire behind him as he walks away. And I don't mean that in the positive way. Iran, Syria, Iraq, ISIS, terrorism in 2016, the racial and political divide in our own country, every major issue where President Obama has failed, it seems like he's giving the torch to Trump by torching everything in his wake. Not just the obvious issues either. President Obama, in these final days of his presidency, is trying to let go of a NATO air base off Portugal, a base that one of our adversaries is eager to claim. Joining me now, global risk analyst John Siddeley. John, good to see you.
Great to be with you, Liz.
All right, John, let me just ask you about this. This is a story, I think you and I talked about this just a little bit off camera. It's very interesting because it's not being highly reported, but it should be, in my opinion, because it's very important. My question to you is, isn't this dangerous for Obama to walk away from a NATO airbase off the coast of Portugal in such a strategic location that it is?
It's an extraordinarily short-sighted move, and this really began about 2009, Liz. And we've had a very good relationship with NATO ally Portugal with this base that was established as a U.S. air base in the North Atlantic about 70 years ago, right after World War II. And we've been using it for refueling, for logistics, for intelligence. But there's a sense now in the Pentagon that it's time to reprogram and recommit all of these facilities and all of our personnel to an air base in the United Kingdom. And the Portuguese are pleading with us to maintain this facility in Portugal. They have very pressing economic needs. And if we're not able to maintain our presence in this facility, well, the Chinese have made very clear with two top delegations in recent years, about 130 Chinese officials, 30 of whom speak perfect, fluent Portuguese, coming there and trying to see if they can do a deal with the Portuguese in the event that the United States does eventually vacate the premises there.
Right, and that's the unbelievable part of the story to me, because not only is it a decision just on what's best for the United States or how we're working with the air base in UK here, it's obvious if we vacate that base in Portugal, it's literally going to be giving away a strategic position to one of our adversaries who's actively trying to acquire more strategic positions around the world.
Well, Liz, you've hit on a very important point there. The Chinese have successfully pursued a similar strategy in far-flung places such as Sri Lanka off the coast of India, and also in Djibouti, a tiny little country in the Gulf of Aden, right next to Somalia and across from a strategic choke point from Yemen. And what they've done is they've established quote-unquote logistical facilities. They will never call it a military base. They have logistical facilities, and they claim to be conducting scientific research or being able to maintain commercial facilities, but it could very easily be converted for military purposes. And the Chinese, as we've seen elsewhere in the world, especially in the Pacific Rim, are playing the long game, Liz. They're looking 10, 20 years ahead. But why would we give up willingly a major NATO air base with one of the longest runways in Europe to the Chinese, who really have no strategic interest in the North Atlantic, but can be very disruptive to U.S. naval and air navigational freedom exercises, as well as maritime traffic?
Right, and I want you to answer that question. I know you posed it rhetorically, but I want to know why. And by the way, this is the same thing that China says about the islands in the South China Sea, that they're not military, they're just logistics based. And John, I don't buy that. I don't buy that for 1 second, even if they don't plan on using them now. Like you said, it's a long game. But why? Why would Obama do this? Is this ideological? Is this political? Is he just trying to make it as hard as possible for Trump?
I don't know how much of this is coming from the White House itself, Liz, and how much of it is coming at the Pentagon. And it could just be exceptionally poor planning. And again, not thinking about what the world looks like in 2020 or 2030 or 2040. But the bottom line is we've had this presence in the North Atlantic, which is absolutely critical to defending the homeland in the event of any threat that might come from the Atlantic Ocean. I mean, the number one responsibility for any chief executive, for any commander-in-chief, is to protect the homeland, and we've been buffeted with two oceans, the Atlantic and the Pacific, to keep foreign threats as far away from the U.S. as possible. Why we would willingly surrender a very important facility to a country that may be a strategic competitor now, but we don't know what the future holds. But it makes absolutely no sense to be able to be letting go of a very important facility whose hosts, the Portuguese government, want the U.S. to maintain the presence there. So the Chinese are looking to see where they can establish these types of facilities all around the world.
Right, and let me look at this from just a tiny bit.
Amounts of money.
Let me look at this from just a tiny bit of a different perspective here, and bear with me, because I know it's hard in a sense for us to understand the consequences when the consequences aren't going to hit us in the next day or two, the next month, even the next year, when it is a long game. But John, get wonky on me just for a second and talk to me about what is China's long game here when they're acquiring these strategic positions, when they're building up islands in the South China Sea, when they're trying to get this air base in Portugal. What is their ultimate goal down the road?
China sees itself not merely as a regional power, but as a global power. The Chinese are investing in ports and facilities, not only what we now call the Silk Road, a multi-trillion-dollar colossal infrastructure network connecting Pacific Rim markets with Western European, Indian Ocean, and African ports and markets. They're also making very sizable investments in Latin America. The Chinese are looking at an entirely global phase of their economic expansion and will likely look to see where they can establish military facilities to protect those economic interests, whether it pertains to access to natural resources, whether it's protecting shipping lanes, whether it's ensuring that they have access to markets that are otherwise challenging. So I think the Chinese are looking at a 10 to 50-year strategy of asserting themselves on the global stage in every part of the world.
Right, and the military aspect of that.
To get in the North Atlantic.
Right, and the military aspect of that, if I understand you correctly, is to help strong-arm their economic interests. That seems like it will impact us. Maybe not now, maybe not tomorrow, but certainly down the road. John, thank you so much for bringing this issue to our attention. As always, great to talk to you.